Welcome to Surviving the Dream with your hosts, Casey Arnold
and David Conley.
We're here to talk to people who seem to have their dream job and find out, what did it take? Is it what they imagined? Is it worth it? How do they do it?
Join us as we uncover the secrets of surviving the dream.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Casey. How are you?
I'm well caffeinated and ready to go.
Let's do it then.
Right.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's not hold back. Let's get in there.
Well, we have someone really smart on the show today, so I felt like I had to up my caffeine game to at least sound smart.
Will I be able to keep up, or am I going to be in trouble?
I don't know. At least you have your accent, makes you sound like you're smart, so I feel like you'll be okay.
Okay, I'll work on that bit then. All right.
She is the chief science officer at Hubbs-SeaWorld Research Institute. How cool is that? I know, and she's going to talk to us.
Chief science officer.
I know. All right, Danielle Haulsee. Hi, thanks for being here with us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
What does that fancy title really mean?
Yeah, so that means that I work directly with the other C-level staff here at the Institute, and I oversee all of the science that we do at our research institute. So I'm a scientist myself, and I do my own research, but I'm really focused a lot on more of kind of the administrative duties and making sure that we are setting strategic priorities for our institute. I work to develop partnerships and foster collaborations and help facilitate all of the research that's being done related to marine conservation and sustainability here at the Institute.
And where is the Institute?
We are located in San Diego, so our main headquarters are right next to the SeaWorld Park in Mission Bay, California. But we also have a marine finfish hatchery in Carlsbad, California, which is about 40 minutes to the north of us here. Mm-hmm. And then we're bi-coastal, so we also have a marine laboratory about an hour and a half south of Orlando and Melbourne Beach, Florida. So we have presence on both the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans.
What's your favorite? Come on, you can say it here. What's your favorite ocean?
I grew up on the East Coast, and so a lot of my life I was, near the Atlantic Ocean, but I was born in California, and I have been happy to return to the West Coast. The kelp forests on the West Coast are beautiful. I love to scuba dive, and the scuba diving on the East Coast, there is some places you can go where it's beautiful, but it's often very murky and not as much to see. And so I very much am appreciating living near the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, interesting.
It's like picking your favorite child.
I thought you were going to avoid that. I thought, it's going to be like, I love all oceans. But no, I think we got there in the end. So Pacific wins. All right.
So what got you into your love of the ocean and preservation stuff? Were you like the kid that was like fascinated by sea monkeys and you're like, how does this work? I'm going to keep them alive forever.
Yeah, that's, I've always loved nature and loved animals. When I was in elementary school, I actually signed up for this club where I learned how to become a water quality monitor, and I would stay after school and go out to the little lagoon that was outside of our elementary school playground and go and test the water quality. So I think there was always something about this, ingrained in me. And I think even when I was a young child, there was a part of me that wanted to be a marine biologist, and I didn't really know what that meant, but I really loved, nature and the ocean. Later, when I was in high school, I rode horses, and my mom worked on a horse farm. And so I was around horses, and I decided I wanted to be a vet, an equine vet or a large animal vet. I thought that was really cool to be able to do kind of medicine and go around and work on, larger animals. And then people were like, well, vet school is really hard to get into and you have to work long hours and you're not going to make a lot of money. So I said, okay, I'll go to school. And that's kind of where I came back to the ocean again. I started as an environmental studies major, which gives you a broad teaching about different aspects of the environment. But I really fell back in love with marine biology and marine ecology and kind of the discoveries that are still out there in the ocean. It's kind of like the last frontier. We know more about the moon than we know about the bottom of our oceans. And I think that quest for exploration and those unknowns and just the challenges of studying things in a giant pool of seawater is really fascinating to me. And so that's where I came back to wanting to study the oceans and wanting to try to tackle those really challenging problems that are facing such an important thing for us and for sustaining life on our Earth.
And when you talk about the bottom of the ocean, I mean, it's how far down have you been?
Let's see. I've scuba diving. I've been down, like 105, 110 feet. So that's the deepest that I've been. I did have the opportunity to go in a little mini submarine one time, but we only went down like 30 feet. So that wasn't very deep. But yeah, I haven't been fortunate enough to get on one of those really, really deep submarines. But I have been on a research cruise where we were we were on a large research vessel. We went from Hawaii to California and crossed kind of that portion of the Pacific Ocean. And when we were in the middle, about as far away from land as you can get on a research boat, we did have a large ROV, so a remotely operated vehicle, which is basically a big robot that you can send down on a cable with really high tech cameras on it and lights. And we were looking at the deep sea creatures that were really, really deep. And so I wasn't on there, but you feel like you're down there when you see these beautiful images of those deep sea creatures. So that was really an exciting opportunity for me.
And did you see things you weren't expecting to see?
Oh yeah, I mean it's real. Deep sea ocean or deep sea researchers don't love it when you call them aliens because they are of this planet, but they do feel very extraterrestrial. They don't look like things that we're used to seeing on land, and it's very special to see the life forms, the different strategies that these creatures use to camouflage themselves in the dark, the different colorations. A lot of them are very soft-bodied things and just form these really amazing, chains of these animals all connected, or really weird fish, morphologies. And so it's special to be able to see those things firsthand.
And as you move, like geographically, can you see the shift and what the creatures look like under there too? Like not just depth wise, but as you move, like east to west, do they start to look different?
Yeah, things definitely have different kind of patches. A lot of it is when you're talking about the deep ocean, a lot of that is kind of vertical structure. But there is structure when you move from the middle of the ocean out where there's really nothing to more coastal systems. You find different assemblages of animals, different diversity. And it's just really cool to see how things have adapted to living in different ecosystems.
Do they have different social structures depending on where they are?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, looking into sociality of marine creatures is kind of a newer emerging research topic, I would say, over the last couple of decades. I think one of the, there's differences in when we're talking about things like schooling fish that might have kind of sociality where they're schooling together to defend against, predators coming to them, or kind of collaboratively feed on resources together. But then, we're also learning that there appears to be more and more sociality in higher level things that we would think of as being really lone predators like sharks and those types of big fish, that they also can be cooperative and have sociality, where they're, choosing to be together for different reasons, which we're just starting to kind of try to pick apart. And that can change depending on where they are geographically, but also what stage of their life they're in. If they're in a stage where they're looking to find mates, or maybe they're in a stage where they're looking to kind of be on their own and do their own thing and not have to compete with each other for food. And that's a really interesting concept, just animal that we think about, Jane Goodall, out in the forest studying primates and looking at their sociality. It's a lot harder to watch a group of sharks or big fish and try to understand if those same interpersonal dynamics are at play. And so that's a really interesting question that we're just starting to try to tease apart in the ocean.
Fascinating. I'd be curious to learn how similar it winds up being to human structure, if there's any similarity.
Yeah. And I focus a lot more on non-mammal fish or non-mammal ocean creatures. So things like fish and sharks, where that's a lot less studied, but sociality in marine mammals. So in killer whales or dolphins or seals and sea lions, that's more established. Those are more similar to what we would kind of think of as happening, for terrestrial creatures.
So what's your specialty then?
Yeah, my degree is in oceanography, but I consider myself a biological oceanographer. I'm really interested in studying the biology of the ocean. I say that because there's all sorts of different oceanographers. There's physical oceanographers that study actually how the currents work and how water mixes and water masses move around. There are chemical oceanographers who study the chemistry of the ocean and how that changes depending on where you are in the world, and different processes that are happening in the coast and in the deep and that sort of thing. And then there's geological oceanographers who study kind of the sediments and how you get sand waves forming and all of kind of the geologic processes of what's happening to the bottoms of our oceans. And so then there's me, biological oceanographer, focusing on the biology. And my background is even more specific than that, is in animal tagging and tracking, and looking at how the conditions in the ocean impact the movements of animals and their migrations. And really my focus is on how different ocean creatures moving around out there impacts our use of them. So we rely on the ocean for things like fisheries, but then there's also conflicts of space, out in the ocean when we want to have commercial fishing grounds dedicated, or a marine protected area dedicated, or an oil platform, or, an offshore wind array put out there, more and more, or shipping vessels. All of these things are conflicting uses of our oceans. And I'm really interested in looking at how dynamic it is that these animals are moving around in response to the water conditions changing. And then there's our use of the oceans often conflicting with that. And so trying to figure out, if we know more about where things are and when they're there, can we design strategies to either mitigate, harmful impacts on endangered species or species that we want to protect, or can we be more responsible and strategic in our fishing and how we're using our resources? So that's really what my main research focus is, under the umbrella of a degree in oceanography.
It's interesting. I was reading the New York Times about the effect the fires have had on the ocean. In Los Angeles, when we were affected by it, but I was reading about the sea lions, how they're affected. Have you been finding out things like that, discovering that?
I haven't made that connection. I'm assuming that potentially the article was maybe connecting like runoff from the fire. So when the fires happen, you lose the vegetation and all that. And then we had those rains that hit right after the fires, which of course we needed the rains for the fires, but the rains hit hard and heavy. And then you have all this runoff of all that debris, and all of that organic matter and just all the other stuff, that is on land it ran off very quickly into the oceans. One of the things in California that we've been dealing with the past couple of years, but we've been going through it right now, that's been impacting the sea lions, that I'm not sure the connection, but potentially it's there, where if you have runoff, you can get a phytoplankton bloom. So a bloom of the base level of the ecosystem, basically all the little very tiny plants, cells that make up kind of the base of the food web in our oceans. Some of those species they're a plant species, but they produce a toxin. And what happens is that toxin starts working its way up the food chain. So the fish that eat and kind of filter the microscopic organisms in the water column start accumulating those toxins in their bodies. And then the predators that eat those fish, like sea lions and dolphins and birds, they will then accumulate more and more of those toxins. And then we'll start seeing those impacts of those toxins on the marine mammals or those predators that are feeding on those fish. So we've seen, record cases when we have these red tides, these harmful algal blooms that are triggered by something maybe like a runoff event or even just natural, turnover in our oceans. That accumulation of toxins impacting the marine mammals in it. And it's something that I know they're seeing a lot of this year, trying to deal with rescuing those sea lions and those animals that they can rescue and then try to rehab.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what can we do about that? I mean, how do we solve that issue? Or is that the ongoing question?
It's one of those wicked problems because there's a lot happening there and it's really large scale. This is something, surface runoff and pollution, non-point source pollution is a tricky problem in all of our water systems. Even in our freshwater systems, we'll see these things happening and when I say non-point source, it means it's kind of like there's not a pipe leading into the ocean that's dumping a bunch of stuff in there that we could cap or redirect or something like that. It's kind of runoff and stuff entering our waterways from all over. And so how do you address that? I think that, sometimes when you have a fire and you have runoff, that's going to be a really tricky thing. You could try to put up barriers, but that's a very acute problem. Whereas this is happening more and more often, and it's partly due to just urbanization on our coastline. So we have a lot of people, there's a lot of stuff happening. There's, stuff accumulating on our streets. Fertilizers, that we're using in our landscaping and on our golf courses and on our lawns and all of that sort of thing. And that can, just the accumulation of that and humans just having stuff on land near water, that's a tricky thing. We can be more mindful about how we're managing stormwater. And I know there's a lot of effort in that, trying to improve our nation's stormwater management. But other than that, we're also combating that there's a lot of big changes happening in our ocean when we're thinking about ocean climate change and things shifting around and blooms that maybe we didn't happen before are now happening here. And a lot of that has to do with the warming that's happening in our ocean, causing different species of phytoplankton to be more abundant at different times of the year. And that's an even trickier problem, because how do you slow that down or what do you do about that? And so one of the things that we can do is try to maintain monitoring that so that we can at least be aware of what's happening and be prepared for if there's going to be, a red tide. We can be aware that probably we need to monitor our shellfish, consumption. So that's something that Fish and Wildlife will monitor for and, put bans on shellfish consumption so that humans aren't impacted by that. But trying to slow down those sorts of big changes, it's not impossible, but it takes a large concerted effort. And I think people being aware of these problems and then, jumping on board in terms of the little things that everybody can do is really important.
Have you noticed a change in your time as an oceanographer? Have you seen that?
I've seen, some shifts. There's definitely, I was studying for my PhD a coastal shark species, the sand tiger shark.
Her PhD is Casey, right?
Yeah. I don't want to stop her though. It's okay.
Yeah, just back in the days when we were all studying sharks.
I did one slightly different from that, but we'll go into that later.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure it was just as cool. So I was studying a local shark species. And, when I was coming up through my PhD, the kind of range of that animal, of the adults of that animal, was New York Harbor down to Florida. And so that's, the area of focus. That was the species range. And since then, there's been more reports of adults kind of going around the Horn of Cape Cod and entering into New England waters. And, it's just a few here and there, but those reports are becoming more and more. And so what we're seeing is that's just a species that I have studied really well. And so that I kind of follow because I'm a sand tiger shark fangirl, I guess. But there are many of these instances happening where we see shifts in the ranges of species based on, they're trying to move to adapt to changes in the conditions, which some species can, but at some point they might not be able to keep going towards our poles. There's going to be other barriers, or that causes them to come into conflict with new fisheries or incompatible other habitats. So these are the things that I'm really interested in, is monitoring and trying to predict or trying to mitigate, if we can, these shifts in movements that we're seeing in our ocean animals.
What is the most surprising thing that you've discovered while doing that like you couldn't have predicted something like that would come across?
Ooh, that's a good question. Oh, most surprising.
Or just surprising. Doesn't have to be top of the list.
Yeah. I'll one of the most surprising things that I've found is maybe not related to the sand tiger work that I did, but another project that I was working on. I've been more recently studying blue marlin and sailfish down in the eastern tropical Pacific. So the Pacific Ocean right off of Central America. And these are large fish. They're billfish. So they're the fish with the big pointy noses on the end, that's like swords. Swordfish is another kind of billfish that they're related to. And one of the most surprising things, these are fish that are found all over the world, and they're huge. They can be marlin can be up to 1,000 pounds. And they can travel really far distances, and they're beautiful, fast swimming, some of the fastest fish in the ocean. And we were putting tags on them down in that part of the world to track them. And I was imagining, it's in the Pacific Ocean, it's all considered one population. And so you imagine that there's mixing happening, right? That the fish are going to leave during certain parts of the year, go out to the middle of the ocean and mix with all the other fish. And then maybe they come back, and it's this seasonal movement. But actually what we found is in that part of the world, they don't really leave. They do travel along the coast there, and they do travel like a couple 100 miles offshore, but they're not really leaving that part of the area. And so the question then becomes, why? Why are they not leaving? Maybe it's because there's a lot of food there for them. There's a lot of tuna and other small fish in that part of the ocean. Well, that's great, except for that part of the ocean is seeing a lot of warming. You get warm water blob, water masses coming in, or you get just shifts in the water masses, and you can get really hot water. I've been down there where the surface water where we were fishing, the temperature was 88 degrees, and you're out in the ocean and it's, 88 degrees Fahrenheit. That's warm. And that's really warm for like a big athletic fish, right? That doesn't have any mechanism to really cool itself down. They don't sweat, or like they can't pant like a dog. And they're really active. And so, but they're choosing to still be in that water. They can go deep, but the problem is that deep in the ocean, you get low oxygen. And so you're basically taking an athlete fish and telling it, well, if you want to cool down, go deep. But if you go down there, you can't breathe. So it's this interesting conundrum that they're in, but they're still staying there and they're not really choosing to leave. And so that's really interesting to me. I'm only taking snapshots of their life, and eventually they may shift their range, or they may move offshore or further north into cooler waters. But those are the types of things that are really interesting to me, to try to think about, why is an animal choosing to behave this way, and how can we use that to better understand where are those resources in the ocean, and then how do we better manage what's going on or reduce our impact if needed, to allow these things to replenish their own populations and be sustainable.
So what? I mean, you're sitting in an office now. I mean, obviously, I wasn't expected to be in a submarine, but well, maybe you
But
could
it would have been so cool.
But that would have been so.
You know, the Wi-Fi connection in a submarine underwater is really poor, so I chose this.
So tell us, what is your day-to-day job now? I mean, like, what happens to you on a Monday if you weren't doing a podcast?
Yeah, so I've shared some really cool stories about, working out in the field, going out fishing and tagging sharks and tagging marlin and all of that. And those are the small moments that marine biologists and marine researchers live for, because 90 to 95% of the time you're sitting at your computer behind a desk, or you're sitting at your desk behind a computer, typing emails, writing papers, analyzing data, writing research proposals to try to get new money in. It's a constant chase for money to do your next project. My role now is more administrative, and some people would find it really boring. I happen to love it. And so I come in, and a normal Monday for me, we have management meetings to make sure we're all on the same page. How's the week going? What are big things coming up? I work very closely with our Hubbs-SeaWorld Research Institute is a nonprofit, so we have a lot of fundraising that we have to do to keep the lights on and the seawater pumping in our lab spaces, and our researchers paychecks, paid. And so I work a lot with our fundraising team to think about writing grant proposals for foundations and looking for private donors who are interested in supporting our mission, working on our science communications, and working on translating kind of the really detailed research that we do into a language that the general public can understand and engage with and find meaningful. When we're scientists, we can get really focused on the nitty gritty, on these like very specific results and these studies that if you just read the paper, you might be like, okay, so what? And so, I'll work with the team on trying to apply that into, this is why the general public should care. This is why our local political representatives should care, and our community should care about the work that we're doing here. We are a public nonprofit, and so all of the work that we're doing here is aimed to try to improve what's going on in their oceans and to give back to our local communities. So I think a lot about those types of things, whether that's reviewing communications or kind of developing strategies for new partnerships that we should be working on. I'm leading kind of larger initiatives in terms of trying to get funding in to renovate our spaces to make them more usable, or get large equipment in to facilitate broader research goals. What else do I do?
Emails, quite a lot.
And facilitating meetings and keeping, finding out what do people need, what are the challenges, what are their roadblocks, and how can I help solve them is kind of, and I think that's where I find a lot of joy, is that I get to help people every day and helping them solve problems that they're facing and facilitating the work that they're doing.
So and you said you're a fangirl, you said, of the tiger sharks, right? So what do you do for fun?
Yeah. I find a lot of joy, in sharing stories like I am with you. I'm really passionate about giving back to education and outreach initiatives. So if you mean what do I do for work fun, then the things that I find the most joy in are, working with students. I'll do, there's a program called Skype a Scientist, where I'll call into classrooms all over the country, and talk to kids from elementary school up to usually high school. And, or I'll even call into some of my friends that I went to college with are now professors, and I'll call into their classes and just talk to them about the research that I've done and how my career progressed and what does my day-to-day look like now, similar to how I'm talking to you guys today. And just trying to help them see kind of what it can look like for them and what it means to be a marine biologist, at least from my perspective. And so I find, and yeah, working with students and trying to see that passion ignite in them and see them become more independent and the wheels turning, is really exciting and fun for me. And going out, whenever we do public outreach events in our local community and sitting at a table and just talking to people over and over about what do we do, and hearing the questions that they'll come up with, and having people ask me about whether or not I think megalodon still exists or are mermaids real, and, hearing their perspectives and talking about those things with people, I think is really fun and engaging for me. So that's what I do for work fun.
What about your weekend? What about Saturday?
I have questions. Are mermaids real?
We'll come back to those. I want to know what happens. I'll tell you afterwards whether they're real or not.
We can work that one out. That might be a separate podcast.
Yeah. We'll get someone.
We'll get
a mermaid expert on next week. What I want to know is so Friday night, you're all done. Are you like, I need to forget about the ocean, or is it just so inherently in you that you have to go?
That's a great question. No, I love any opportunity to spend time, with the ocean. I love going out. I love the forest every once in a while, going out, being inland. But I'm really fortunate to live, where I live in San Diego and having such amazing access to the ocean. I haven't gone surfing lately. The water's pretty cold right now, but, I will go surfing or snorkeling. We have a local spot here in La Jolla where there's a colony of leopard sharks, these small kind of 3 to 4 foot leopard sharks. The females come into the shallows during the day to warm up in the warm, shallow water, and you can just go wading right into the water with your snorkels and go snorkeling with these hundreds of leopard sharks will aggregate there. And that's like really cool to me to be able to see something. So, they don't care about you. They're not dangerous. They will swim away from you.
I'm glad you said that last bit. That was a bit I was worried about.
For me are awesome. And just being able, even just walking along the beach and seeing if there's a cool shell or, going tide pooling, things like that, or just to be able to witness it yourself is really special. And anytime I can get on a boat, I'm, in heaven to get out there and is awesome.
So the little girl who was like out there testing water, what would she think about your life and your job now?
Yeah, I think she never, I never really knew that this was a career pathway that I could take. I just kind of followed, you come to a fork in the road, you make a decision. Okay, I'll go to college. Okay, the economy is awful as I'm coming out of college. I'll go to grad school so I can keep, delay having to find a real job. And then I've just kind of progressed from there. I think my little girl self would be really proud. I've been, now that I'm in the job that I have now, I've been reflecting a lot on kind of that journey. And as I was making each one of those decisions at those crossroads, some people I think have this vision in mind of what they want to be. And I don't know that I had kind of loose ideas, but I had a lot of imposter syndrome too. Like, that's, when I went to grad school, I was like, I couldn't get my PhD. That's too big. I don't think I could handle that level of responsibility or pressure to be a PhD level scientist, and then I went into grad school. I started as a master's student, and I just fell in love with the research that I was doing. And I fell in love with my program, and I had really good mentorship that helped me kind of work through that and, helping me say, no, you can do this. You can do this. And so just kind of like jumping in and trying to be very brave and saying, okay, I'm going to do this. I don't know what's after that, but I'm going to do this. And I think the little girl part of me that was, I was one of those little girls that like got really good grades and always wanted to like work really hard in school. And I'm, happy with how things have gone. And,
What would you tell that little girl now if you could speak to her?
Oh, I would tell her, good job. I'm proud. Good job getting good grades. And My mom, I recently was talking to my mom, and she was telling me a story about how it was really important to me that I had to get straight A's. So, when I was in elementary school, so I could go to college, even though like I was one of the first first generation college students, in my family. So I don't know where I got that, but I'm glad I had that in me. I would say maybe work on not being such a procrastinator. I'm one of those people who like performs really well under that pressure of having really a deadline coming up. So like, I don't know if you could work through those types of things earlier so you don't develop that as a habit. That would be nice. But.
So your parents weren't academics, or they weren't in this field at all?
No. It was just something that I found, and I went to high school in the middle of small town Pennsylvania. So I was removed from the ocean for at least my middle school and high school life. I was in the FFA. And I, was thinking a lot about agriculture and where our food comes from at that point in my life. And actually, even in college, I went to Gettysburg College, which is inland. And I ran the student garden there and grew food for our local food pantry over the summer. That was like my summer college job. So, I thought, there was a moment in my life where I thought a lot about agriculture and where our food comes from. And now I've just I still think about where our food comes from, but mostly related to the ocean and where our seafood comes from and how do we be more sustainable with our seafood.
So where did this love of the ocean come from? From the Gulf
I don't know. When I was a small child, I lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So I was in a coastal town there. We would go to the beach and go tide pooling, when I was a kid. My mom and my grandfather were both scuba certified. So I, grew up hearing about them scuba diving. And that was really inspiring. And my grandfather, too, when I was a little girl, he would take me fishing, mostly river fishing for trout. But I think there's a little bit of that, fishing. Like when I was really little, that was a fun thing that I got to do as a kid. I'm also a Pisces. And so, this love of the water is kind of ingrained in me, according to the stars.
It was in the stars.
You can scoff if you will, but I read that stuff too. And sometimes you're like, how is it so fitting? So weird.
It's funny. A lot of my friends are also Pisces, and there's a large number of people that work here at Hubbs who are also Pisces. So, I don't know.
There could be a connection.
There could be something there. You're a water sign. You love the water.
Do you think that there's another like big leap in there for you? Like another pivot crossroads, like you've been talking about how those moments happen to you? Like, do you plan them? Do you think things coming ahead, or you just sort of stay open to the possibility of that?
Yeah, I think right now, those big questions. What are you going to do with your life? Yeah.
You're already doing something great.
I think right now, the past maybe decade or so, maybe not decade, but that makes me sound really old, but the past couple of years it's a lot of transition. You get your PhD and then you're in these kind of short-term postdoc positions. They're temporary positions where you're kind of gaining extra skills, working on your own independence and leadership as a researcher. And I did that for a couple of years. And then you're just constantly applying for jobs during that time, and applying for jobs to try to find like your more settled place is a job in and of itself. And it's very stressful. And I've been here now at Hubbs for 2 years. I really love it. And I feel like this is a place where I'm at a place in my life right now where I feel a little bit settled. This is it was a big job for me to jump into. I'm young to be jumping into this level of a job, but there's a lot of growth for me to happen in this position. And that's really exciting for me. I'm constantly learning how to do new things that I wasn't taught in school, things that are unrelated to my degree, but are more related to managing people and running a business, a nonprofit, but it's still kind of a business, and thinking about big budgets and cash flow and all of that sort of thing. I'm still getting to learn new things and develop new skills, and that's really exciting for me. And so do I think I'll be here? I'm 37 now. Do I think I'll be here until I'm in the, retiring here? I'm not sure. So I'm open to other opportunities, but I see this as a stage right now where I can still grow a lot in this position and spend some time here. And that feels kind of nice to just sit,
catch your breath and enjoy. So right now, this is a good dream. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it is kind of a dream job for me. The pathway and the pipeline that I was in, going to, from college straight into grad school, straight into my postdoc, that pipeline is really trying to pipe people into the academic professors, getting a job at a college or a university, teaching students and maintaining some research on the side. That is the traditional pipeline. And getting a job like this is one of those dream jobs where it's outside of academia. I don't have to teach students, but I can still work with students, which I find really rewarding. And then I can focus, and I have a lot of flexibility in the research that I can do as long as it aligns with our mission. And so that's really nice too. And I can be really creative, and it's all mission. Our mission is giving back to the oceans. And so everything that I'm facilitating or working on myself is trying to give back. And that's really, sustainability and conservation. That's like really what drives me and motivates me. And so it's a really dream job where, if you're in an academic setting, a lot of that is like, what's the next discovery you're going to make? Or how are you pushing the frontiers of your field, which is really important for some people to do. But I'm more of kind of the person that wants to apply those things and try to implement change. And a job like this allows me to do that. Or if you're in a government agency, you're at the whims of kind of the administration that you're under. And you could be working on an initiative for 4 years that you think is really important and that you're passionate about, and the administration can change. And then all of a sudden that's no longer a national priority. And I just think that could be really frustrating as a scientist, to be kind of under that kind of pressure and to not have that sort of independence. And so being here at a nonprofit and getting to really directly give back to the ocean and to our local communities, and having that flexibility, it's a really good fit for me. And so I'm just really, it is a dream job for me that I never really knew existed. There's not a lot of positions like this out there. And so I'm just really happy to be here.
Excellent.
Well, I'm glad you're happy. Unfortunately, we're coming to the end of the podcast now, so we're going to have to ask you the questions that we ask everybody.
Okay, great.
Question number one, there's no wrong answer. If you won the lottery, the big one, what would you do?
Oh, that is a good question. Well, I would dedicate some of the money to Hubbs to, just push some of there's such low hanging fruit, where if I won a big lottery, just a small chunk of that could make a huge difference for not only the research, like my dream research of going out and tagging a bunch of animals. I also work with underwater robotics that are really expensive. And so having, just a little startup seed money to get a robotics lab going, would be just awesome. And there's just little things that just a small portion of a big lottery winning could facilitate here at the Institute that I could give back, and it would make me feel really good. But if I had to be completely honest, I also have not really taken a break in my life. I never took a gap year. The longest vacation I've ever taken was just over 2 weeks, 15 days. And, so straight out of high school into college, straight out of college into grad school, straight out of grad school, the next day starting my postdoc, and then from there and there. And so I think just having that, like, the finances to just say, like, I don't think I'm the type of person that could ever not work, but to be able to step back and maybe travel and for a month or maybe a year, I don't know, and take a little bit of a break would be amazing to me, just to be able to see some parts of the world that I want to see before they're kind of ruined. And there's like there are some places in our world that it's kind of scary. Maybe eventually they'll come back. Geologic time is very long, but in my lifetime, there's things that we might lose that I would like to see.
I hope you get to see them.
Thank you. Me too. I hope you do too.
Thank you. And I see a nice, I don't know, maybe yacht trip in your future if you win the lottery.
Just stopping all over the world and a nice sailboat sounds lovely to me.
With a glass bottom. There you go.
Exactly. My question is, what is your favorite snack or comfort food?
Oh, good question. I really love Sour Patch Kids. I don't know why. That's sour, sweet. If I'm having a bad day, just a couple of those. I also love the combination of Sour Patch Kids and popcorn. I recently had a movie night over the weekend where I just was watching a movie, and just popcorn and Sour Patch Kids together is like the perfect combination for me.
I just had that for dinner the other night while watching actually the 100-foot wave. So I feel like I was vibing with you.
You were prepping for this.
All right, this is going to be interesting. What's your favorite animal and why?
Oh, okay. As much as I love ocean creatures, I really love dogs.
Oh. And
maybe that's a cop-out, but I really do love dogs. I think we don't deserve them as humans. They are so so comforting, so smart, so just in tune with humans that I love dogs. So I'm going to just throw that out there. But because I'm supposed to be an ocean person, I'll bring it back to the ocean. And I will say, I often get asked, what's my favorite shark? And my answer is maybe not surprising because I am the fangirl. Is sand tiger sharks, but I'll tell you why. And it's because there's around 400 species of sharks, and sand tigers have a couple of really unique things that I think make them really cool. One is that they have interuterine cannibalism. So the first sharks have 2 uteruses. The first pups that hatch inside and kind of develop in each of the uteruses will then go around in sand tigers and eat all of their other developing brothers and sisters. And so they are born kind of already predators. They're born 3 feet long, already having hunted down their other brothers and sisters in the womb, which I think is very metal and kind of cool for a shark.
How adorable.
Oh my God.
The other thing, which you might not expect, given what I just told you, you might think, oh, they're so aggressive, but that's actually not true. And it's so not true that they actually are known to go up to the surface of the water and they take a big gulp of air and they hold it in their bellies so that they can be more buoyant and float, so that they don't have to swim as much, because they're just really chill. And I just love that about them. They're just so chill that they just hold a little balloon of air in their bellies so that they don't have to keep swimming, and they can just kind of float around and wait for a fish to swim by them that they can eat. And so they're kind of 2 counterpoints to sand tigers that are unique to them as a species that I think makes them really cool. And they're, not talked about as much. So very
true. They're trying to recover from all that uterine trauma.
Yeah. I'm going to be talking about them later today, I think.
There you go.
I'm going to have to go Google them and get a mental image for that.
Yeah, there's videos. There is somebody somehow put a camera in there and there's a video. So look it up.
Wow.
There's my afternoon.
That is specific. All right. Final question, Danielle.
Yes.
If we really knew you, what would we know about you?
Oh, Good question. If you really knew me, yeah, I think that you would find that I am, I'm a person who loves a lot of different things. I've talked a lot about the ocean, but I am a person who, I love watching movies. I love playing games. I love going hiking. I love, spending time with friends and cooking and watching cooking shows, learning how to cook. I love just learning how to do new things. I love going rock climbing and surfing and snorkeling. And so I'm, one of those people, I'm up for anything for the most part. And I just am really focused on trying to love life and experience life and sharing that with other people. I love to just do things as friend groups and bring my family into things and share with people about the cool things that I'm seeing on my adventures. And I think that, I think one thing that you could know me, I'm always down for an adventure.
I like that. Well, your passion is very inspiring. I'm so glad you're out there doing all these things. Thank you for being here, for doing all these things. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see where life takes you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking with both of you. I hope you learned a little bit of some cool facts you can share with your friends later on today. Sure. Thank you so much for letting me kind of just blab about my life and my career.
We loved it.
Thank you, Danielle. Been great.
Thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Quick shout out to Mike Nicholas for being our tech savior and Carmen Sclafani, also known as Wiser Time. Thanks for our music. And thank you all for listening.